sharpshooter shot to the left. He killed the gentleman in the water tower here.
That's where the other shooter was. There was one I heard in the water tower. There was one by the fence.
And still, obviously, initial reports. But what we do know...
We find ourselves in very strange times. Few are still foolish enough not to recognize this as a period of collapse. Massive debts we can't pay, skyrocketing inflation, rates of depression and suicide and addiction, a pervasive sense of hopelessness and despair and disorientation. Nations that have completely lost their sense of self, their identity, their rootedness. The relatively happy and stable lands our fathers so painstakingly built across generations have been largely destroyed from the inside out, with men like Mayorkas harnessing the now immense power of state and capital to forcibly pry open our figurative gates of Toledo and do everything in their power to ensure the millions of men from the Third World, often criminals, often fighting-age men without families, pour into every last corner of the nation. Meanwhile, corporate vultures who care for absolutely nothing but the profit bottom line now aggressively import East Indians and Asians to fill the most high-paying jobs, helped along by BlackRock and their diversity programs, DEI, etc., while non-Jewish whites have been practically shut out from the handful of Ivy League schools we are so frequently told are the most prestigious, as well as from most of the highest-paying jobs. Meanwhile, our media and social media, our television and movies and pop culture seem consciously tailored to spiritually and psychologically destroy, to subtly communicate the most poisonous and insidious messaging and programming imaginable. Power and influence hierarchies that once drew the best of men upward and pushed their opposites downward have now largely been inverted to do the opposite. We've been conditioned to mistake mere cleverness and shrewdness for intelligence, egotistical bravado for substantive confidence, mere money-making for success. Men, made atomized and rootless, now desperately clamor to ascend that financial ladder, often even pinning their very notions of self-worth to this ascent. Oblivious, often uncaring, as to who or what they're ultimately serving in the process, and who or what they are largely becoming slaves to. Atop this, we're now surrounded by a greater amount of temptation and novelty and distraction than any generation in human history. So at the very moment we should most have our wits about us, an overwhelming number of us are now habitually and exclusively seeking entertainment and escape in ways that both atomize and make impotent. A dissipation of vital energies so extreme and widespread that it, too, almost seems planned, purposeful, part of some larger conscious aim. From the broadest vantage point, all of life might be framed as search for signal amidst noise, a search for the beautiful and fruitful and strengthening among the sea of dross. Modernity itself might be seen as a dross production machine, now operating on an industrial scale. Infinite novelty that so clogs the airwaves with noise, endless noise. As difficult as it might seem right this moment, from our position firmly stuck in this muck, never forget the gorgeous, endless starry sky that still stretches out before us each night. Never forget our Creator and His handiwork. The sun that still rises each morning on the incredible natural beauty of our home, its balance and equilibrium with such profound and timeless lessons to teach. And never forget that this sickness and chaos is very temporal, ephemeral, transient, a narrow frequency we've allowed ourselves to be locked into, a superficial layer thinly constructed atop such a wondrous work of depth and beauty. And not just our home, but our very souls. They are vastly bigger than this, and even capable of wholly upending and reorienting all of this. The moment this recognition fully sets in, the moment this innate power is finally and fully recognized. And yet, in some respects, things aren't nearly as bad as they might seem. Remember, the stage is completely captured, but please never make the mistake of believing this stage represents the sum total of reality. Countless forms of stagecraft are engaged in, of necessity, by the equivalent of script writers, directors, producers, to create and shape public perceptions. Because the best way to fully demoralize their target population is to effectively frame their situation as hopeless. Ignore this delusion. It really is delusion. The frail and sickly wizard behind the curtain cultivates a structure and projects a picture of a world in which his dominance is total and all-pervasive and unchallengeable, when in reality, all it takes is a critical mass to courageously plant their feet and both recognize and refuse to play their games anymore. To envision new structures, new ways of doing things in their place. And we need to fully come to terms with the likelihood of a very rocky road ahead. Our political and economic structures may indeed fail, order may break down, our nations themselves, as we know them, may indeed collapse. But something vastly greater than we have now can and will eventually rise in its place if we keep our heads about us. This should be the focus point on the horizon. There's no telling precisely what the future holds right this second. There are far too many variables and unknowns for that. Far too much chaos, and still far too many looming question marks. Our task is to simply let that energy continue to build, to watch closely and wait for the right moments, the right individuals and institutions and ideas, and where they don't yet exist, to have the courage to step forward and help create them, and wherever possible, to be them. When the dust finally someday settles, all of those with an internal compass still well-oriented, capable of intuitively recognizing true north, will, one way or another, ultimately come together in the end. In a unique type of successful triumph, I don't think many of us have the reference points even to envision at this unprecedented low point. But consider this to be the period of immense struggle and adventure along the way. Try to recognize the beauty even in this moment of great trial and tribulation. Rise to the challenge and seek to prove yourself equal to it.